Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Zoom program tonight. We've got a really exciting night of programming in store for you. We're going to give just a moment for everyone to sign in and log on, and then we'll get underway. In the meantime, please, as always, feel free to share in the chat where you're tuning in from and how the weather is there, as we like to do. Hopefully, it's not too ghastly hot. We've got a muggy summer evening here in Madison, Wisconsin, but thankfully not too terrible. So drop us a line, let us know where you're watching from, and we'll get started here in just a moment. Hi, John. Yes, and it is hot in DC. I have a brother-in-law there, and we have been getting regular reports from them. So we're sure thinking about all of you bearing the heat there and elsewhere in the country right now. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get my screen sharing going and then start my introduction so that we can get the program started in a reasonable time frame here. All right. Ashley, does that look good on your end?
It does, yeah.
Okay, well, very good. Well, as people come in, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's program, Technical Genius, Behind the Scenes with O. Winston Link's Famous Photographs. This is part of the Center for Railroad Photography and Art's monthly series of online presentations. I'm Scott Lotus, President and Executive Director of the Center, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you tonight. I know we have some first-timers tuning in. We're so glad that you're joining us. And so before we get started, I'd just like to say a few words about the Center. We love carrying out our mission of preserving and presenting significant images of railroading. So if you're joining us for the first time, we want you to know more about who we are. And if you're already a longtime member, we want you to know how much we appreciate your support. Everything we do is possible because of you. Thank you. Railroads share a vibrant relationship with art in many forms. Here, this photograph shows the Norfolk and Western's Lawman Band playing bluegrass music during a 611 steam excursion in Roanoke, Virginia in 1982. This photograph was taken by the center's founder, John Gruber, who sought to emphasize people and the lingering appeal of railroads, and especially steam locomotives, in much of his photography. This is another of John's photographs of the 611 from an excursion in 1994, just before it ended its excursion service in the 90s. There are hundreds of railroad museums and societies around the country, but the Center for Railroad Photography and Art is the only one to have this unique focus on photography, art, and railroading's visual culture. We also have a pretty unique business model here. We don't have a museum or a gallery space of our own. We have a business office and an archival storage facility that are both located in Madison, Wisconsin. From these, we maintain a growing collection of more than 500,000 images that provide much of the material for everything else that we do. You can peruse many of them on Odyssey, our online collections management system that we launched last year. So far, we've shared nearly 14,000 of our images there, and we have more coming online every week. You can get to that on our website, which is railphoto-art.org, then clicking on the Collections tab. And from there, you can go to Odyssey to browse our holdings. And I have a few samples from Roanoke and nearby shown on the screen here. Our other main initiatives include putting together exhibitions that travel to museums and galleries all over the country. Our biggest was Railroaders, Jack Delano's Homefront Photography, which we produced with the Chicago History Museum. This summer, we have a very special exhibition of railroad paintings on display at the Herschel and Adler Galleries in Manhattan, New York City. All of the works come from the incredible collection of Peter Moss, who serves on our board, and his wife, Christine. They pledged their art collection to the center last year, and this will be its first public showing. This exhibit opens on Thursday of this week, and it will be on display through August 23rd. The galleries are open Monday through Friday from 9:30 to 4:45, and they will also host Saturday receptions on July 20th and August 10th. I'll be there on the 20th of July, so if you're going to be in New York this summer, please stop by. If you want more information about that, please let us know. We'll be happy to pass that along. This should be a really great show. There'll be 22 paintings on display in the galleries. And then in addition to these online presentations that we do over Zoom, we also host conferences and events. This group photograph shows about a third of the attendees at our 2024 conference at Lake Forest College, north of Chicago, which we held just about 3 weeks ago. We also make annual awards for creative imagery, and we'll be announcing this year's winners on August 1st, coming up in less than a month. We also publish books and our quarterly journal called Railroad Heritage. Each 68-page issue is ad-free and mailed out to our members in March, June, September, and December. And this photograph is most of our board and staff from a couple of years ago. We are a nonprofit organization funded primarily by our community of members whose support makes up about 70% of our annual budget. You truly empower everything we do, and we cannot thank you enough. If you want to learn more about the center, visit our website, railphoto-art.org. Follow us on social media. We're at railphotoart on all of the major platforms. You can watch many more of our online presentations on our YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/railphotoart. During the presentation tonight, feel free to use the chat to make comments and to chat with one another. If you have questions for our presenter, we will have time for those at the end. Please put those in the Q&A feature of Zoom. That allows us to keep track of them and try to make sure they all get answered. So with that, it is now my great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight and then turn the mic over to her. Ashley Webb received her BA in History and Anthropology from Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, and then went to England's Bournemouth University for her MA in Museum Studies. She is currently the Curator of Collections and Exhibitions and the Acting Executive Director with the Historical Society of Western Virginia, which operates both the Roanoke History and the Winston Link Museums. And of course, that's how I've gotten to know her. The Link Museum is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. Ashley will tell you more about that, and I am grateful to our mutual friend, David Good, for adding me to their planning committee. I wanted to say a little bit more about Ashley than what's in her official bio. That led me to a Google search where it quickly became apparent that the total number of museums in Western Virginia and the number of museums in Western Virginia where Ashley is involved is roughly the same number. On top of all that, Ashley's specialty is fashion history, and she owns Bustle Textiles, a historic dress preservation company, where you see her in this picture. I'm not quite sure how she does it all. She knows a good deal about photography too, and she's pulled out some great behind-the-scenes material from the Link collection to share with us tonight. Ashley, we're so glad you're here. I'll turn it over to you, and you can take it away.
Thank you so much, Scott. I really appreciate that. That was that was amazing. So I just have a couple of disclaimers for you all first before we get started. Hopefully you won't be looking at me too much. I am sitting in my dining room, and I have an Edison light above my dining room table, and it's starting to get dark a lot quicker than I had realized. So you're getting a red cast over me. I really apologize for that, but hopefully you won't be looking at me. You'll be looking at the photographs. The second is I do have cats. I'm going to try and keep them quiet and to a minimum, but I cannot guarantee any of that. And then the third is I get really excited, and when I get really excited, I talk fast. So just be prepared. You are warned. I can't help it, but because I know I'm going to get excited about this. So I'm sure almost every single one of you has heard of or know of some of Link's most iconic works, especially if you're involved with the railroad or know anything about nighttime train photography, or if you've seen Tom Garber's lecture through the CRP&A online platform, video platform. While Link didn't create this specific genre of photography, he certainly has influenced countless others, and his influence is still felt today, 70 years later. In tonight's presentation, I hope to leave you all with a few things: a little more knowledge on Winston Link, why his work was so influential, as well as how his planning and technical prowess created this amazing body of work, which he called the Norfolk and Western Project. Ogle Winston Link was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1914 to Anne Winston Jones and Ernest Albert Link. Although he remained a New Yorker for the majority of his life and even maintained the Brooklyn accent and attitude, his parents weren't originally New Yorkers. In fact, his father was born in the Appalachian foothills of West Virginia near Harper's Ferry, and his mother was born near Richmond, Virginia. These Appalachian connections created an affection for the rural communities that the N&W project would use in its backdrop. And we're going to talk more about that soon. He was the middle child of three, and his father's occupation as a manual arts teacher at a New York City school encouraged Link's love for the arts as well as for photography. His father cultivated his creativity, but also pushed him in science. Here you can see the birdhouses on the left-hand side of the screen. Those are birdhouses that he and his father had built. And his father really pushed him and encouraged him to use his hands and think through problems, which became a part of a lot of his photography later on in life. And while his photography experience was fairly limited, he did have a knack for difficult technical projects. In 1932, Link created a special camera using his father's old folding camera in order to take photographs of a solar eclipse. So here you see, these are the cameras, his father's folding camera that he made. He actually put a piece of glass on the backhand side to capture the image, and then used one side of a pair of, it looks like binoculars, to help create that lens. He entered the photographs and the camera in a citywide science fair displayed at the Natural History Museum in New York. He won first place in this competition and was featured in the newspaper. I don't know for sure if it was the New York Times, but I assume it was something of that sort. And so this technical engineering is something he continued for the rest of his life, attempting to better his own photography equipment, cameras, tripods, flash equipment, and the like. Link was really secretive and protective over his techniques. So I'm not sure if any of these actually made it into the mainstream, and I'm going to show you a few of the diagrams a little bit later. Link graduated from Brooklyn Polytechnic Institute in 1937 with a degree in civil engineering. He had been class president for 3 years and photographic editor of the school newspaper. Because the United States was still in the throes of the Depression, Link did not find a position open in his field of civil engineering once he had graduated, but instead took a photography position with the large public relations firm Carl Bayer and Associates. Bayer worked for several high-profile clients, and Link was hired to create catchy product photographs so they'd be published in magazines and newspapers. This particular photograph that you're seeing here is advertising Tough Flex glass, and it's one that Link created under his tenure at Bayer. So what you're basically seeing is a woman standing on several blocks of ice, which is separated by a sheet of Tough Flex glass here, and underneath is fire. And the ad was meant to be startling and to enforce the brand's assertion that it could withstand, quote, fire and ice. He had a lot of startling and catchy ads that he created, and some of the ideology and symbolism that he used to convey these messages are sort of lost today. He had, a number of them. I think there was one where someone had a gun pointed at a pig, and I'm not even sure what that was advertising at the time. But again, like there's a lot of stuff in there that, again, it's lost over time. Link often went on assignment for Bayer in Louisiana and Texas, and many of his early photographs showcased Louisiana life in the late 1930s and early 1940s. Rice harvesting, beekeeping, alligator hunting, shrimp boating, etc. And we have very few of these in our collection at the Link Museum, but most of these remain in Louisiana with Link's son. On the right-hand side, it's not a great picture, but that is the first night photograph that Link took in Louisiana using flash bulbs. And that's kind of important in how his body work developed from that later on. It was in Louisiana that Link met Martille Oglesby, a model and actress. They met on the set of The Buccaneer in 1937, where Martille was the body double for a female lead in that film. They married in 1942, but then divorced in 1947. With World War II on the horizon, Link left Bayer and joined Columbia University's Airborne Instruments Laboratory in New York. He was partially deaf and so was deemed unfit for the military, which is why he did not serve. Instead, he helped the laboratory work on confidential projects such as creating an airborne submarine detector. It was in this position that Link learned technical aspects such as lighting and capturing a large and quickly moving object that would influence his later projects. This F-89 in flight image is one that he took with all of these factors combined. If you look at the notebook at the left, these are some of the notes that Link kept in relation to this image. He kept detailed notes on many of his pictures, who was in the photograph, how was set up, exposures and f-stop settings, even something so mundane as how much how much he paid for his lunch. Anything relating to that image that he might need to know later. It's unclear what exactly Link did for the lab. It was probably confidential, but he did find that the Long Island Railroad was a short distance away from his location at the lab. And so he would often head there to photograph in his time off. It was during this time at the lab that he began to envision a nighttime photography project using steam trains. And I think this image of the Long Island Railroad is probably one of his most important ones, mainly because it's taken from a relatively high angle. He was always looking out for certain vantage points in order to create a unique composition. And again, that plays into a lot of his photography later. After the war, Bayer offered him a position, but instead, Link decided to create his own commercial photography business. Over the course of the commercial career, he photographed for Texaco, Ethel, B.F. Goodrich, Kaiser Fraser Corporation, and many others. So fast forward slightly to 1955. Link was in Stanton, Virginia on a commercial project, and he decided to drive to nearby Waynesboro Station. While there, he fell in love with the antiquated charm which you see in this photograph. The cracked window, the outdated technology, the whole romance of the situation, and he felt like he had stepped back in time. After striking up a conversation with the station agent, who made him feel very welcome, so much so that the agent decided to invite him back the next night, Link took him up on this offer. So this image is the first that started the Norfolk and Western project. It was taken on January 21st, 1955, as Norfolk and Western's train number 2, northbound from Roanoke to Hagerstown, Maryland, arrived in Waynesboro. And as I mentioned earlier, Link was percolating this idea of capturing steam trains at night. At this point in time, almost all railroads had begun phasing steam engines out of service in favor of diesel. So the Norfolk and Western was the last to switch. And because of this time, he decided to plan to document and photograph these steam engines. This first night on January 21st, 1955, he ended up taking 7 images, and then he went back to New York the next day and began planning. But the whole project wasn't just about the steam locomotives. He wanted to capture everyday goings-on of life along the line, what it took to maintain these engines and the trains themselves against the backdrop of their rural communities. This image was actually taken much later during the project, but I think it captures that whole concept wholeheartedly, with the individuals in the foreground gathering corn with their wagon and the horses, and then of course the train, just a bucolic setting in the background. So after his first night photography, his first night shoot in January of 1955, Link began planning. He decided to completely self-fund this project, documenting as much as he could before the steam trains blinked out of existence. He armed himself with train timetables, maps of all the rail lines, and took several journeys via train to scout locations. Here he is in his studio in New York City, mapping out a route along the train lines for potential photo locations. So as I mentioned earlier, the NNW was one of the last lines to maintain a regular schedule of steam passenger and steam freight along its 4 lines, all of which emanated from Roanoke. He chose to focus on the Shenandoah, the Radford, and the Pocahontas divisions, as the mountainous Appalachian landscape provided a better backdrop than the flat expanse from Roanoke to Norfolk. Over the course of 5 years, Link made 17 trips up and down the Norfolk and Western lines from New York and took over 2,200 photographs in this project. Sorry. In the notebook on the right, you'll see crossed out pages. In many of Link's early notebooks documenting the NNW project. He wrote down photo ideas, the train schedule, how to best photograph these spots. And then he also conversed with Ben Delaney, Norfolk and Western's public relations manager. The railroad loved the idea of this documentation and fully supported the project, allowing him access to sites, the ability to converse with engineers and conductors in real time along the line, and even to stop and reposition locomotives for images. In the letter to Ben Delaney on the left, Link details the route he plans to take along with the photographs he was planning to capture on his third trip in 1955. So if you look again at on the right, some of these definitely did not make it to the final images. And then on the left-hand side, I think he did pretty much the majority of those when he was talking to Ben about which photographs he wanted to capture. So on his second trip down from New York, Link focused on the people who lovingly maintain the locomotives at the Bristol, Bluefield, and Roanoke shops. These are both actually from the Roanoke shops at Schaefer's Crossing. These images not only detail the people that worked on and maintained the trains, it also showcases the sheer size of these machines. In many of Link's photographs, the locomotive is in the background, not necessarily as an afterthought, but with a planned scene in the foreground, like this variation of Sometimes the Electricity Fails in Vesuvius, Virginia. I think this was purposeful in many cases to illustrate the indifference of the people and how the train blends into the background because of the consistency it had on their daily lives. In this variation, you see more to the image than just the gas pump that W.A. Miller the gas pump and W.A. Miller and the immediate foreground. You have the couple who later married at the left, and then a boy in the right-hand side with Bert the horse. And I thought that when I originally was looking at this image, I thought that was a dog, but it is in fact a little horse. So I think Link, when he was working on composing these, I think, there was possibly someone walking by and he was like, hey, get in the photograph. I'll give you a silver dollar. Yeah, bring your horse. Sure. Whatever to make the composition the most interesting. In others, the train is the focus on the larger landscape. One of Link's favorite places to photograph was on the Blue Ridge grade seen here. It was a large stretch of ascending track through the mountains, and it took 2 locomotives to pull freight up the Blue Ridge grade. It was an area along the line that the steam freights could really showcase their power, and Link absolutely loved this. At one time, he said that the Blue Ridge grade was his favorite place to photograph, and his joy is evident when he made sound and film recordings along this stretch of the railroad. Link's most iconic work is of nighttime train photography, like this one here of Main Line on Main Street. And that's actually, it says Mail Street, but it should say Main Street, in North Fork, West Virginia, which, by the way, we recently had a lecture with John Abbott, who wrote Following in the Owl's Footsteps. And he actually revisited a lot of the locations that Link photographed. And looking at this location today, there's literally nothing there. The buildings are gone. It's just foliage, which is really, really upsetting. So he did nighttime photography, but he also did some color and day photography, most notably along the Abington branch. The Abington branch itself didn't have an evening train, so Link decided to capture what he could during the day. Not all of his color works were along this line, but the majority were. And of course, this is the exact same image, just one in black and white and one in color. He once commented that the trains were black, the coal was black, the night was black. So what am I supposed to do with color? It was a very new technology at this time, which is another reason why he didn't really photograph too much in color. And this is the Husk/Nella depot. Like many of the rural lines, the depot acted as the post office, the general store, and the Western Union office. So the post office itself was Husk, but the depot and the Norfolk and Western's timetable, it was known as Nella. The story was told that the station stop here had originally been named Allen in recognition of a railroad official, but it was then noted later that there was another Allen on the line, so the name was simply spelled backwards. And no one seems to know why the railroad just didn't call it Husk. So Husk also had a dog named Jimbo that Link coined the Hound of Husk, and he would sit on the steps outside the post office. This is just a little aside, by the way. So Jimbo would always howl as the train came by. And I think in one of his sound recordings, he actually did even feature Jimbo howling. So you can see him over here in this image, which I absolutely love. I love this image. But fortunately for us, Link did take so many color photographs on the Abingdon branch. The black and whites are great, but the color ones really add an additional punch of beauty. And since it was such a fairly new, not invention, but a fairly new technology at the time, the colors we've got several variations of where he was trying to figure out the color frequency. So they're all absolutely beautiful each and every way. Unlike today, where you could take an image and easily convert it to a black and white photograph, Link had to set up two different camera angles, one with the black and white film and the other one with color. This image at Green Cove, which the station is still there, by the way, along the Virginia Creeper Trail. So on the one on the left, you can actually see it. This is a good example of what I'm talking about. So the angles are so subtle that you would just assume that it's the same camera taking the exact same shot. And if you look over here on this side, and then if you have if you look over here on this side, you have just a slight angle difference where you can actually see the side of the station on the color one, and then in the black and white, the trees are missing. So again, it's just very slight variations in how he set up the camera angles. So as I mentioned before, Link took a total of 17 trips through Shenandoah over a span of 5 years to photograph the last of the steam engines. He was not only on a personal agenda to document as much as he could, but he was also on a huge time crunch. By 1957, only 1 or 2 lines were left running steam. Since he was funding this himself, he had to get the maximum impact out of each trip and out of each image he took. He used a 4x5 graphic view film camera, and he only had one shot to get the image he needed. He mentioned early on in this process that he would set the entire scene up and hope that the train was in the right spot, his lights didn't misfire, or that it didn't get overexposed in any way. In many cases, he'd have to wait until New York to get back to process the film and see how it turned out. And then later on in the project, because a lot of the images just didn't work out, that he ended up renting a trailer and processed the negatives on the spot. That way he would know pretty much immediately if he needed to rephotograph it. In order to create the 9 images he is so well known for, there's a lot of planning and setup beforehand. There were miles of cables, several flash units to set up, plus the cameras. In many cases, the bulbs misfired, cables got sliced, and he had to repair. And in one instance, the proprietor where they were photographing charged them $1 a minute for electricity. And it was at this point that Link decided he needed to create something so he wouldn't have to rely on others for electricity. He had been tinkering with creating some sort of power supply as early as 1940, but after that particular woman I just mentioned, he ended up focusing on getting more of these technical details finalized. And it was with this particular photograph that he was able to create something. In 1958, he submitted this image to an international photography contest and won 2nd place. And with the prize money, he purchased a converter. He devised that he could use 2 12-volt lead acid batteries to supply 115 volts of power at 60 cycles, supplying through a series circuit. It was completely portable. It was light and durable with tin terminals to prevent broken or loose connections while out on a shoot, which was super, super important because once it was broken or your battery, if anything happened, you could easily be able to fix it. Here you can actually see George Tom, one of Link's assistants, using this battery pack and this behind the scenes photo of Link photographing Archie Stover at Luray Crossing. So the battery pack is down here. So to take this image, so he had 2 cameras here set up to try and capture the train and Archie and the crossing, and then so then he had a 3rd camera behind him to take this in particular photograph. So as I mentioned earlier, Link also designed a number of tripod and flash equipment to be used while out shooting. So on the right, we have design for a portable tripod head, which would lock the legs of the tripod in place to prevent sliding when setting it up on glass or marble. In his notarized letter about the piece, he explained, by rotating the knurled plate, spur gear, the knurled plate is 7, so up here, spur gear 9 drives 3 smaller spurs, 1, these guys here, mounted on the same shaft as bevel gear 20. Bevel gear 2, bevel gear 2. Bevel gear 2 rotates bevel gear 3, which is fixed to shaft bolt 4. When shaft bolt 4 turns, it tightens itself against tripod leg 5, which is hinged about shaft bolt 4. The system of gears is designed so that all 3 legs are tightened at the same time by the same amount. And then he goes on about, in this notarized letter, he goes on about the other numbers and how they relate to locking the pan and camera into the tripod itself. The image on the left did not come with a notarized letter, so I'm not exactly sure what's happening in this image, but I'm guessing it has something to do with his flash equipment. But as you can tell from both of these images and these detailed drawings, that he was extremely detailed with the technical engineering, with documenting all of this. He was very territorial over his techniques and designs, and when he was creating things like this for potential patents, he had them notarized. He made copies, photostat copies, and then he sent copies to himself via registered mail. I think he wanted to help the community, the photo community at large, as I mentioned earlier, but I don't think any of his works were ever mass produced because he was so secretive about it all. And he didn't really want anybody to steal his ideas. I have no idea if these were ever actually patented. We just have the notarized copies in our collection. So I mentioned that Link planned everything out, and he had this vision in 1955, even before he began shooting. So after that first image in Waynesboro, he began following the tracks in his spare time, looking for picturesque or unique spots to photograph. On the right, again, this is another such example of where he thought might make a good photograph, but not all of these made it into final images. So up here, Millwood, old graveyard. We don't have any images of graveyards. He did get the grain silo at Luray. So he had little check marks and crosses out of where he felt like might be good or bad places to photograph. And then once he figured all of that out, he then detailed his plans to Ben Delaney, Norfolk and Western's PR rep. And this is a copy of what he sent him. Again, so he would send these letters to people, and then he would make a copy for himself, keep the copy, so that way he would know what he had discussed with them. So that's what you see here on the left. In addition to that, he began writing in contacts in the areas where he was going to be photographing, sending copies of magazines, more information on his project, and letting others know about the cooperation and backing of the railroad, asking if he could stage a scene in which to photograph. So this is exactly what you're seeing here. You've got a copy of Link's letter to the Grottoes fire chief in Grottoes, Virginia, on the left-hand side, along with the fire chief giving his reply and consent on the right-hand side. So then once he had that, he would then map out where his camera, reflectors, and other items would be staged against the railroad. So all of the little colored half circles down here in the image are all of his flash units. The squiggly item in the lower right corner is his camera, the triangle, the field of view. And if you look at where the units are placed, you'll notice they're always just out of sight. So he's got garage here. So those are just out of sight. This is outside of the view as well. And he made sure the single-use bulbs he was using for the reflectors would have enough power to light the objects he wanted to be seen. So if you look at his diagram and then you pick out where the lights are placed and then look at the final image, you begin to see how genius his techniques really are. So this is the garage that I had just mentioned. So you can see it. Here's a bulb here. There's another one here lighting that. Both of these are behind this garage. He had some lights out on this side. He had the one out on this side, all pointing towards the inside of the image. This night shot in particular looks almost as if it's been taken during the day, with the illumination and how little shadow everything gives off. The only telltale sign that it's not is the ink black of the night sky. This is actually probably one of the most successfully staged photographs that Link took. Because when he would show this image to people, like in exhibitions and things, they'd always be like, how did you just happen to come by on a night when they were getting ready to go out on a call? He staged all of this. He did not leave anything to chance. He wanted to make sure everything was ready and focused. That way, as the train went by, he would have this scene perfectly composed that he could just take a quick shot and then be done. They rolled all of their trucks out just for this particular image. So there was no fire call. Everyone agreed was there to be ready to be photographed. There was no fire. So I think that's a testament to his techniques, a testament to him being able to talk with the townspeople and make friends along the way. He would also enlist other station agents on these shots for these shoots. So for his images in Luray, Virginia, he sent ahead flash bulbs, which were single use, so he wouldn't have to carry more than he needed in his car. And that's exactly what's happening in this letter here. He's telling the Troy Humphreys, who, by the way, is the gentleman you saw in the cracked window image. He was a station agent at, he was a station agent in Waynesboro. But so he would try and send things ahead. That way he wouldn't have to worry about lugging everything down from New York. So these are actually two images of him lugging things out of his car on a later trip down Shenandoah. And how he fit everything into his 1952 Buick convertible is beyond me. But he did keep a list of where he kept everything in his car. That way he would know how to get it back in, when to take it out, what was missing. He did mention in one letter that all of his equipment combined weighed about 150 pounds. So in addition to sending letters ahead and mapping, Link usually also took photographs during the day. In this instance, with Hawksbill Creek and Luray, he has done this very thing. Another reason he preferred nighttime photography was that there was a lot of unsightly things you spotted during the day that you could then obscure or ignore at night with carefully placed lights. He also comments about the sun and how you can't move the sun. So that's another reason why he avoided photographing during the day. So this is another instance where you had both black and white film camera placed next to a color film camera to capture the same image. So Link would go scout it out, get the lay of the land during the day, scope out where to set his lights, where they all needed to be positioned, set everything up, and then many cases wait until dark. So here you have the layout for the image taken at Hawksbill Creek. Link arranged the Judd children, the Judge family, to be playing in the creek, and I'm pretty sure this is them just down here, the little 5 circles down here at the bottom, with the train in the background, adding more to the image than just the train. So here you see the setup for the Hawksbill Creek image. The flashes are just out of sight. And in this case, I believe the flash that he had for the train actually misfired, as we have a letter from Link to an individual stating that they would have to retake this particular image from the previous summer, but he doesn't really give a reason why. So I think that he was trying to capture the shot, took one behind him of him capturing the shot, but it misfired because this doesn't look anything like the final image, which is here. And this is from the reshoot in 1956. So again, you have a family playing in the creek in the foreground, the train in the background, and you don't see any of the unsightly things that you had seen. Well, they're not really unsightly, but what he might have thought as unsightly during the day photograph. Link's most famous image is that of Hotshot eastbound at the Jaeger Drive-In in West Virginia. So just like the others, he began writing to all parties involved prior to his visit, determining if the theater owners would be amenable to him setting up and photographing on their property as the train passes. And again, just like the others, he states he's making a series of photographs showing a steam train, showing the steam railroad operating at night. So while traveling over the NW, he noticed the entire parking area and the screen built inside a curve of the railroad, which from the bridge over the stream, it looked like as though he could get a good shot over the tops of the cars, showing the train rounding the bend to the right of the screen. So, which in his diagram, this diagram here, you actually don't even know that there is a stream there. And I honestly, I've never been to Jaeger, so I had no idea that there was a stream just along the railroad either. So it's really awesome to have these letters from Link as well. He continues, the picture would show the cars, the screen, and the train, and how far away was the bridge from the screen. So you've got all the cars here. The screen is right here. And then, of course, you have the railroad. So all of these numbers are the feet, trying to figure out the cable distance. So he wanted to try and get everything settled, as well as with the cabling, as well as how many flash units he'd have to space. The Jaeger drive-in individuals said they replied that it was 600 feet from the bridge to the screen. So if you're looking at this diagram and how he wanted to set it up, you see all the cable feet, again, 60 feet, 75, 50, and so on and so forth. Where he wanted the train to stop, which is this line here, and then where he wanted to put his lights, and so on and so forth. So he's got one coming out of the building, one shooting to the cars. His camera is here. This is the couple that's seen in the very foreground of the image. And speaking of that couple, in another letter to the Jaeger drive-in, he relayed the setup information, asked if they had a ladder, and then he also asked if they knew a nice-looking couple, around 20 or so, but that he'd be photographing the backs of their heads, and so he'd also be using his convertible for the couple. So he didn't really care if he wanted them to be pretty, but he was going to be photographing the backs of their heads, so I guess it didn't really matter too much. Here is the first of the negatives for this shoot. You can see all of his flash units, which are the little black dots or the orbs right in front of the track. And this is actually one of the few images that I know of personally where he couldn't hide them. He tried to hide them in most of his images. As you can see also on this, the movie screen is blank. And that's because the screen itself got washed out from the light from all of his flash units. So he had to photograph the screen several times, which is what you're seeing here. And then he chose one of those images to create a contact print in order to create a new negative. The movie that was playing that night was Battle Taxi, a 1955 Korean war drama. All the little glints that you're seeing on these negatives are not scratch negatives. Those are actually the lights glinting off the sides of the cars throughout the parking lot. So this is the little area where you have the speakers and all of the images. This little glint here, that's the mirror of the car. So again, it's not scratched negatives. And so here is the final image. And you can't actually tell, but this is the copy that he created the negative from for the final print. Link used an early form of Photoshop, aka scissors and glue, to place the plane on the movie screen. And I don't know if you can actually tell, but this is slightly raised from the print itself. So the last behind the scenes images that I wanted to talk about tonight was Gooseneck Dam over the Maury River. This image took 6 days to set up and was probably one of the most complicated images for Link to capture. So here what you're seeing is an image of the train tracks behind the dam and a pretty good illustration of how wide the Maury River was across and the sheer feat of capturing this image. So this is, again, one of his images that he took during the day to scope it out and figure out how he wanted to compose the entire situation. So here you have his mock-up. Let's see, we've got this line here is, I believe, the dam right here. You've got the camera placed. Where's the camera? Now that I'm looking at it, I'm pretty sure this is the camera here in the field of view where he wanted the train to be. So he's got all of his lights there, where he's got a light here, and then, yeah, it's an extremely complicated setup. He also details in the lower right corner down here how he wanted, or each day, what needed to happen for the setup. So Tuesday, to look it over. Wednesday, set up half day. Thursday, set up all day. Friday, complete connections and up all night. Saturday, set up, make 2 images. Sunday, clean up. And the up all night bit is probably to identify the trains that would be coming through, the regularity of them, what kind of schedule they kept. That way they could then be able to pinpoint which locomotive, whether steam or diesel or whatever, 1218, 611, which the one they wanted to capture. So 6 days of setup. What exactly did this look like? So first they hauled their equipment. So you can see them down here, bringing all their equipment down and figure out where to place it to start out with. You can see them down the bottom of the rocks. Second, they began running a cable across the Mara River to act as a tightrope. So they had a top and a bottom wire to help steady themselves. And so here they're sending over the river, or the tightrope. Next, they had to create a pulley system with string to help keep the flash equipment cabling elevated and out of the water. So you have them here unraveling and figuring out how they want to work that out. And then here you can see the string going on the underside and the cabling running across it so it's elevated. They created the pulley system, which again you can see right here, to help keep the flash equipment elevated and out of the water. And then they strung the cabling across. And then so with the tight wire, you have, it's either Link or Tom on the tree on the other side, helping to pull that cabling across. They then had to walk across the tightrope, carrying their equipment. And I have no idea how many times they ended up having to do that. They could only carry so much. And so they had to, I'm sure, had to take several trips back and forth across the river with all of their gear. And then, as mentioned in his notes, they stayed up all night. This was a pretty regular occurrence for him. He would often stake out the day or the day before, the night before, in order to determine what trains came by when, the regularity of them, whether it was steam or diesel, and then what would be best to photograph. So he would often set up tents like this. Sorry, my cat. Okay. So they often set up tents like this, and then basically have fires going and just have little camp outs at night. This one was in March, so it probably wasn't terribly chilly. And other ones that's in January, and so they have like their big heavy coats on. But so hopefully it was a fair night for this project. So then he set up his cameras, and then they were ready to go for the final night. So this, again, he took 2 shots with this particular negative. So you've got him setting up on the opposite side with his camera and then actually in the waterfall. So this was the resulting image, and it's really, really hard to tell how much work went into creating this image because the vantage point looks like it's just right off the side of the road. And if you look closely, you can actually see where his lights were stationed on the train. And so this was taken in March of 1956, still fairly early in the project. So you've got lights here, lights here, lights here, here, and then back here. Again, he hid his the flash units, so you don't necessarily see them in this one. So this is still fairly early on in the project, and probably one of his most technically complicated throughout the entire project. So this is one of the pages from his notebooks detailing from this particular setup, and it details the expenses from this trip. So this was a 13-day trip. And so this was a few days prior, March 26th through March 27th, 29th, 20th, and 29th. This is a few days prior to the setup, and you can see rope, soldering iron over here, gloves, boots, all bought in prep for this particular image. He spent 13 days, as I said, along the Shenandoah line for this particular one. 6 of those were set up for this image. He spent around $860 on these 13 days, which in one inflation calculator equates to about $9,933 just for this one trip. And he took 17 trips over the course of 5 years. He self-funded this entire project. So he should have, hopefully he had enough good contracts through like BF Goodrich and Kaiser Fraser for his commercial projects to help take several weeks off and to be able to fund several stints like this. So Link photographed all the way up to the end of steam when it was fully removed from the Norfolk and Western lines in May of 1960. In many instances, the towns that depended so regularly on trains disappeared as freight and passenger services changed. And so here you have one of his diesel images taken 1957 or 1958. And again, he didn't hate diesel. He just preferred the steam. And so there's not a lot of diesel photographs in this collection. This is one of the few. So many of the communities, locations, and even the tracks themselves have disappeared from the modern landscape, which is why it makes these photographs so important today. It's a composite history of rural Appalachia when America was phasing out of one technology and into another, forever changing how people did business, how they interacted, and how the train interacted with the landscape itself. And like I said earlier, the general store, like you see here at Green Cove, the general store was also the depot. It was the Western Union office and also the post office. So the ending of the steam passenger service really kind of put an end to rural life such as this and situations such as that. So moving on, Link, he didn't really get famous until the 1980s with his first exhibition at the Chrysler Museum of Art and the Akron Museum of Art in Ohio. The Chrysler is in Norfolk, Virginia. So 1983, he doesn't really necessarily become famous, but becomes more well-known. Around the same time, he married a woman named Conchita Mendoza. She was 20 years younger than him. He was in his 60s, she was in her 40s, and it seemed to be a happy marriage. So he actually got married in the Green Cove station, which is this one. He just got married right behind that counter to Conchita, second wife. She was all in. But unfortunately, at some point early on in their marriage, she started telling others that he had Alzheimer's. She started locking him up in the basement. She started squirreling away payments because she was acting as his manager. Started squirreling away payments for sales on prints. Link filed for divorce in 1992, but by then, pretty much most of the damage had been done. She was stealing prints, cameras, camera equipment. She luckily she stole a few negatives, but luckily Link had the foresight to give the negatives to a friend. So those were pretty much intact. And over the course of a few years, she had eventually stolen over $1 million worth of equipment. She was convicted in 1996 and then released in 2001. Link died in 2001, so he didn't really get to see what eventually happened because she again then started selling things in 2003, this time on eBay, pretty much just after she had gotten out, and was discovered, then put back in jail or prison for another 20 years. And so not really a happy ending for Link, unfortunately, but I think she's now out. Who knows where she is now, at least, but she never really gave up the secrets of where she hid a lot of the things. They did find some of it, but not all of it. So fast forward to 2000. When Norfolk and Western donated the passenger station to the city of Roanoke. Passenger service ended in Roanoke in 1971, and the station was used as offices after that time period. So with the help of Winston Link and his estate, a museum would be built inside the basement of the former passenger station, which was remodeled by Raymond Loewy in 1949. This is actually where our museum is housed today. It looks pretty much just like it did from the remodel in 1949 by Raymond Loewy. And you see here on the left-hand side, this is actually Link standing in front of the train schedule board, which is still there on the back side of the museum. So you can come see that when you decide to come visit. But unfortunately, Link never saw the the fruition or the development of the museum. He had the ideas and talked with a lot of individuals within Roanoke to create the museum, but he never saw the finished project. He died, ironically, of a heart attack outside of a train station in 2001. And he's actually buried in West Virginia near his parents. But the museum went forward, and we opened in 2004. So this is our 20th anniversary this year. So if you fancy a trip down to Roanoke, this would be a good year to do it. We are actually having our 20th anniversary celebration at the station on August 17th. So come on down. It's from 11 to 3. We're going to have the street clothes, the street festival with some vendors. I'm working on getting potentially a locomotive for the back. That's still yet to be determined, but we'll have the Grotto's fire truck, which was restored from the 1948, was restored recently, which Link actually photographed early on in his project. And we'll have just a discounted museum admission, merchandise, such as Life Along the Line. We're getting a reprint of that. So that should be out by then, as well as pre-orders on our Steam and Steel calendar, which will not be online for a little while. Same thing with Life Along the Line. It won't be online for a little while. And then we've got 2 new exhibits up right now, Technical Genius, which is basically this presentation, but with more to it, more little images of like Popes on the Porch. We've got Heartless Cabin, and what else? Like there's a lot of other different Camp Joy. So those all are detailed in that exhibition, as well as a recreation of Link's 1983 Ghost Trains exhibit at the Chrysler. So it's just a small section of that, which he wrote all the labels for. So if you're interested in coming to visit, this is a good time to do it, and we'd love to have you. And so that's the presentation. So thank you all so much. I'm going to turn it back over to Scott, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Well, thanks so much, Ashley. That was a spectacular presentation, and thanks everyone for tuning in and joining us tonight. Apologies for my audio issues earlier. Is that feedback better on my end now? Good. Okay. Well, thank you again for a wonderful presentation, and I certainly encourage everyone to go see the Link Museum anytime, but especially on August 17th this year. That sounds like some great stuff in the works there. Ashley, if I could ask you a question, and I'd also encourage anyone to put questions into that Q&A feature in Zoom. We'd be happy to take those. But I mean, I've been studying Link's photography for more than half my life at this point, and yet your presentation is the first time I'd seen so many of those diagrams and notes from his notebook. It was wonderful to see those, and I just wonder if you could share a little bit more about your research into them, about the museum's holdings, and how other people who'd like to see more of those might have a chance to do so.
Yeah, so we do have a small display of some of his notebooks in the museum. For some reason, they were never scanned like all the negatives were and then put online. So I have been in the process of scanning all of them. They're not available yet online for people to actually see and use them for research, but that is eventually a hope of mine to get them up there. And it's funny, when the History Museum moved into the Link space, we had to do some remodeling, and there was, this case that we had to move, so I had to take everything out. And so I was kind of flipping through them, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are all of his notes. This is, all of his diagrams, everything. There's not really a lot of interpretation in the museum about this. And so I kind of had this vision, like Link did early on in his project, like I should do an exhibit on this. So, I foresee this becoming a more of a bigger thing later on in the museum. But yes, he took such detailed notes. He had one black notebook that he had all of his f-stop information, when to do what for lighting, such a huge wealth of information on how he really set everything up. So eventually they will be online through our website, roanokehistory.org. Everyone can check those out. And you can actually see them for yourself. So
no, spectacular. I mean, it was just so
I think
cool
there's probably about 15 notebooks.
Wow.
We don't have all 15. Some of them have been lost to time, but Yeah, I think there's 15 notebooks detailing each individual trip. And then he had all his letters and, all of that. So
It was spectacular just to see that page from his trip planning, and it was like July 31st, outdoor movie, Jaeger. It's like that's the note for the most famous photograph he ever did. It's just,
yeah,
just
yeah. And he also he labeled all of his negatives with numbers, sequential numbers. So he would also then label his the diagrams. So then you'd be able to correspond to both of those as well. So which is super helpful for an archivist and a researcher later on. So
yeah, that's a great plug for us too. Label, label, label everything. Well, so one person asked, well, I know you are doing a reprint of Life Along the Line. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so we are doing a limited edition reprint of Life Along the Line. This one will be in paperback, softbound, unlike the original, which is in hardbound, because they're very, very hard to get. So we do own the rights to that. So that I actually just sent it off to the printer today. So we should have that within the next few weeks. Again, it's a very limited run. They will be $40 at the museum. They will probably go online around Christmas time. So if you're, dying to get one of those copies, definitely come to the museum and get that before we sell out.
Well, and the follow-up to that question is, for all the interpretation that's already been done about Link's work, do you think there's enough material still out there for yet more publications in the future?
Yes, I definitely think so. I think Railfans is doing not on Link specifically, but I think they're going to be doing a publication on just night photography
Oh,
and
yes, they
Link's
are.
influence with that. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that's going to be coming out at some point soon. But then, his commercial work's not even really been talked about a lot. He, much like his railroad photography, he was very interested in unique angles and showcasing the product, the commercial product, and certain lights. And so we're actually going to be doing a Kaiser Fraser exhibition next summer of his works with the Kaiser Fraser car company. Yeah, next summer. So, there's a lot still to unpack. Even though all of his railroad works are fairly finite, there's still a lot, I notice something new in every single image every time I look at them. So
No, I'd never birthed the horse until tonight, so that was a new
yeah.
one for me.
Yeah, the last time I did this presentation, I was like, I'm pretty sure it's a dog. And then I went back and looked and I was like, no, that is definitely a little horse. That is a horse.
I thought it was a big black lab too.
Yeah.
Speaking of animals, I did see we had a cat cameo at some point. And one of our attendees was asking about your cats. Do you have
Oh, I
one,
have,
two?
yeah, so I have five.
Oh, wow.
Started out as three, and then 2 years ago, a feral cat had kittens in our backyard, and so we trapped them. We were supposed to foster them, and that was a foster fail. So,
That happens
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah. So we've got three old ones, 15, 14, 13, and then two kittens that are two now. So, yeah.
Fantastic. My aunt and uncle would approve. Well, another attendee asked if you could just describe a little bit more about Link's overall collection and what your holdings are, and then where other materials might be located.
Yeah, so we are the repository for all of Link's negatives, all of his Norfolk and Western project negatives. So within that, there's about 2,300 of those negatives. We do not hold copyright of those, where we share copyright. But so we are the repository for all of those negatives. We still have, we probably have about 500 prints, just Norfolk and Western related. As part of the Link Trust, we are not allowed to recreate prints. So once there's a finite number out there,
Right.
we cannot
Right.
print anymore. We cannot sell any unless they're consignment. So we have all of those. And then we have a number of other collections from like Joan Thomas, Roy Zeider, other big names that were friends with Link as part of the trust. We have some commercial negatives in our collection, some commercial prints. Those don't see the light of day too much because we're more focused on, being in Roanoke with the railroad in the Norfolk and Western. And then we have all of his equipment. So all of his equipment that was recovered. So we've got several of his graphic view cameras on display, all of his cabling, the power supply, all of his audio recording equipment, and then sound recordings as well. So we have a pretty vast collection of just his stuff. And then we also keep track of all of the publications that he's been in. So individuals, or not individuals, but magazines and books, they do contact us for image use. And so we keep track of all those as well. So yeah, it's a lot.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, it looks like we've gotten through all the questions that came in through the Q&A. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. We will be back in August with a presentation about our award winners. Those are going to be announced on August 1st, and we will get information out about that Zoom program on our website and social media just as soon as we can. And of course, if you can, make plans to go see Ashley and the Link Museum on August 17th for their 20th anniversary celebration. If you're going to be in New York before that, you can see our Peter Moss art collection and exhibit at the Herschel and Adler Galleries through August 23rd, with our receptions there on July 20th and August 10th. So lots of fun things happening, at least on the East Coast, for railroad photography. I hear there's some big steam engine operating out on the West Coast, so I think there's fun things happening out there too. A great summer for railroad photography here. Ashley, thank you again so much for joining us. This was an absolute delight. We'll send you a transcript of the chat. There's been lots of really nice comments and compliments there. And again, we just really appreciate you and everyone tuning in tonight. So thanks so much.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Good night, everybody.